Have you ever witnessed a situation where someone, believing themselves to be too powerful, forgets that respect is priceless? The scene you're about to see begins precisely like that, inside a silent courtroom, where every glance carries tension and every gesture reveals more than words can express. A billionaire enters through the main door with the confidence of someone who believes that money solves everything. His firm step, impeccable suit, air of superiority, everything about him seems to say that the case is already won before it even begins. Stay with me until the end, because what you are about to discover may surprise you. He walks around the room as if he owns the place, greeting only those he considers worthy of his importance, completely ignoring everyone else. And then, among the court employees, his eyes fall on a black woman sitting calmly, reviewing some papers. The billionaire frowns, observes her for a moment, and makes an ironic comment full of contempt, as if she were just someone worthless, voiceless, without any power in that setting. Have you ever experienced this? Have you ever seen someone underestimated simply because of their appearance? It is precisely this social wound that begins to throb in this story. The woman, however, doesn't react. She doesn't change. She simply takes a deep breath and maintains the serenity of someone who knows her own worth, even when the world insists on denying it. And it is in this contrast between arrogance and dignity that the tension grows. The billionaire, accustomed to ordering, humiliating and trampling over those he considers inferior, continues on his way without imagining that he is committing the first great mistake of his life. He believes that the court is just another arena where his name, his status, and his fortune will speak louder. He doesn't imagine, not for a second, that he is about to be confronted by a truth far greater than his ego. While he converses with his lawyers, making jokes and mocking the process, the imaginary camera zooms in on that woman. The light seems to rest on her, revealing the silent strength of someone who has faced far greater challenges than the arrogance of a rich man. She holds her documents firmly, adjusts her glasses, and discreetly looks at the billionaire, not with fear, but with the calm of someone who has seen this kind of behavior many times before. The humiliation she suffered there, at that moment, was not the first, but perhaps it would be the last. The courtroom slowly fills up. People converse in hushed voices, lawyers organize files, and the clock ticks with almost cruel precision. The billionaire continues to believe that this is just another simple case, another victory foretold. However, the atmosphere subtly shifts, as if something is about to be revealed. There's a feeling in the air, almost imperceptible, that piques the curiosity of the observer. Why does he treat everyone with such superiority? Why does he believe so strongly in his own impunity? And above all, who is this woman he humiliated without a second thought? What he doesn't know, and what you're about to discover, is that none of his certainties will survive the next few minutes. The story is only beginning, and every detail of this courtroom will take on a new meaning very soon. Stay with me, because the twist that's coming involves not just justice, it involves dignity, strength, and a revelation capable of shattering the pride of any billionaire. And it's precisely at this moment, when silence fills the room and everyone prepares for the start of the trial, that something unexpected begins to happen. And while the court remains silent, something inside you might also fall silent for a moment, as if this story awakens memories or feelings you've tried to forget. If this topic resonates with you, leave a comment below about what has touched you the most so far. Sometimes, sharing what we feel is a way to give voice to the injustices that many people still face every day, and your experience can help someone going through the same situation. And before the next part of this story unfolds, I want to ask you something from the bottom of my heart. If this narrative captivated you, if it sparked indignation, curiosity, or simply that desire to see poetic justice happen, please leave a like. It may seem like a small gesture, but it makes all the difference. It's what shows YouTube that this content deserves to be seen. by more people who are also looking for deep, moving stories full of twists and turns. And of course, if you enjoy this type of narrative, if you want to follow other stories that move us, that make us think and feel, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Your participation here is what makes this space grow and reach more people with messages that touch, inspire, and provoke important reflections. It's like building a community that believes in the power of truth, dignity, and justice, even when they seem small in the face of power. But while you do that, we return to the courtroom, where every second now seems laden with new meaning, almost as if everyone is waiting for the mask of arrogance to finally fall. The weight of that silence in the courtroom seemed to contain not only the present, but also everything the woman had already lived through to get there. And it is precisely at this point that the story gains another depth. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because behind that serene posture lay an entire journey built with effort, difficult decisions, and a strength that does not come from privilege, but from daily battles. From a very young age, she understood that nothing would come easy, and that to break through invisible barriers, she would need to prove herself 100 times more than anyone else. While many slept peacefully, she remained awake, surrounded by books, noting every detail, studying complicated laws, delving into codes, seeking the hidden truth behind each case. There were nights when the exhaustion weighed so heavily that her vision seemed to blur, but she continued because she believed that her transformation depended on consistency, not comfort. She grew up hearing comments that tried to diminish her dreams, whispers that said that wasn't a place for her, looks that carried more judgment than words. At every step, she had to face obstacles that weren't in the books: prejudice, disbelief, environments where her talent was ignored even by those who considered themselves righteous. But she learned early on that true authority isn't built solely on titles. It's born from the soul, from discipline, from the courage to persevere when everyone expects you to give up. Her mindset was shaped in the fire of overcoming challenges, and this made her even more sensitive to the pain of others who also struggled to be seen. When she finally entered the judicial system, she carried a mixture of pride and responsibility. She knew that behind every decision were lives, stories, consequences, and this motivated her to go beyond what any protocol required. The impact of her choices never went unnoticed by her, because she understood how much justice can transform an entire existence. Even so, despite her knowledge and competence, she faced environments where men like that billionaire dominated the table, believing that financial power is synonymous with human worth. She always knew that this type of man sees the world as a stage where only those with money deserve to be the protagonist. And what's most intriguing is that, unlike them, she didn't need to prove anything to anyone at that moment. Her strength was already there, solid, built over years of sacrifices. The billionaire had no idea that face-to-face was someone who knew very deeply the silent game of power relations, the behind-the-scenes dealings that few see, the manipulations that go unnoticed by those who don't. Live the reality of inequality. He didn't know that this woman had already dealt with countless men like that, all convinced that they can buy respect, intimidate those who don't bow down, and reduce others to the condition that suits them. But what always gave the woman an advantage was not her position, but her conscience. She saw beyond the illusory glitter of appearances. She knew how to recognize the fragility hidden behind arrogance, the insecurity masked by grandiose poses, the desperate. Need many have to be seen as invincible? While the billionaire relied on money, she relied on her own history, and nothing is more powerful than a history that has withstood what tried to destroy it. Her past was her invisible armor, and each chapter of that journey reinforced her firm presence in that courtroom. It's curious to see how certain lives seem to run in opposite directions, and yet intersect at some decisive point. On one side, him, accustomed to ordering, to dominating, to believing that the world should revolve around his whims. On the other, her who has learned to observe, to listen, to perceive nuances that many ignore. He believed he was facing someone irrelevant, but little did he know that he was being observed by someone who deeply understands the hidden layers of human behavior, someone who knows the essence behind the masks. Every gesture she made in that courtroom held a greater significance than it seemed. Her calm posture, her attentive gaze, the way she held the documents, everything bore the mark of someone who had won internal and external battles, someone who had learned to choose her fights wisely. It was impossible not to feel the strength emanating from her, even before a single word was spoken. And if the billionaire had stopped for a second to truly look, perhaps he would have realized that she wasn't just an employee. There was a presence there that carried an authority built with purpose, with truth, with scars that no one there could imagine. Gradually, the courtroom atmosphere began to reflect this invisible tension. People passed by her and greeted her with sincere respect, a respect born of recognition, not obligation. Meanwhile, the billionaire remained trapped in his own bubble, repeating his usual pattern: underestimate first, regret later. The woman, however, knew that life has a peculiar way of revealing who we truly are, not in grand speeches but in small moments, in the details that no one controls. And that moment was one of those decisive moments where the truth begins to emerge from the silence. Her past wasn't just a collection of memories, it was the foundation that would support everything that was about to happen. And while he continued blinded by his vanity, she remained steadfast, aware that great upheavals arise precisely when someone insists on not seeing the obvious. The encounter between these two very different worlds was only beginning, and the outcome of this silent tension would be far more profound than anyone there could have foreseen. Comment below, "This makes sense to me." And while this silent tension spread through the courtroom, the billionaire seemed completely oblivious to what was happening around him. He moved like someone who already knew the outcome, as if victory had been written from the first minute. He spoke loudly, laughed excessively, interrupted employees who were merely trying to organize the documents. It was as if he believed that his presence alone was enough to define the course of that trial. His mentality was built on decades of privilege and decisions always made with the feeling that nothing could touch him. And somehow, this behavior revealed much more than he imagined. Little did he know that he was about to face the most humiliating lesson of his life. The way he addressed people revealed a hidden truth that few like to admit. There are individuals who only recognize limits when they finally clash with them. That grandiose posture, that almost theatrical arrogance, wasn't just a result of wealth. It was a mechanism he used to shield himself from any insecurity. Behind the firm voice and the superior gaze lay a fragility he would never allow others to perceive. And precisely for that reason, he treated everyone as if they were disposable pieces in his journey. The impact of this was visible in the expressions of the employees, who exchanged uncomfortable glances, as if watching a repeated, yet still embarrassing, performance. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there's something fascinating about how some people build entire castles on illusions. The billionaire believed that whoever has money dictates the rules of the game. And this belief shaped every gesture, every word, every attempt to impose authority. He didn't realize that the more he tried to demonstrate power, the more he exposed the depths of his insecurity. It was like observing a fortress made of glass, impressive at first glance, but fragile when analyzed closely. People like that rarely understand the magnitude of their own actions because they spend their lives surrounded by those who bow down, not those who confront. With each passing minute, the courtroom seemed to transform into a stage where layer upon layer of revelations overlapped. The lawyers tried to keep up, but it was impossible not to notice the discomfort on their faces every time he spoke too quickly, or when he mocked details that should have been treated seriously. He truly believed that the law was just another negotiable obstacle, another item on the list of things he could control with his influence. This mentality not only revealed his arrogance, but also showed how trapped he was in a world that no longer exists, a world where money and autonomy walk hand in hand without contestation. People around him were beginning to sense something in the air, as if a change was about to happen. It was that instinctive feeling that precedes major turning points, that premonition that cannot be explained, only perceived. The billionaire, however, continued acting as if nothing could shake him. He walked briskly through the courtroom, shuffling his papers without looking at anyone, reviewing arguments he hadn't even written, only repeated. His journey to that point had taught him to blindly trust his own strength, but it had never prepared him to deal with someone who could not be intimidated. Meanwhile, the woman remained, seated, observing everything with the calm of someone who sees beyond appearances. There was no judgment in her eyes, only understanding. She knew exactly who he was, not by his name, nor by his fortune, but by his behavior. Men like him follow predictable patterns, believe that arrogance is synonymous with authority, confuse noise with power. And it was this silent certainty of hers that created an even greater tension. The difference between them was striking. She had built each achievement on the weight of responsibility, while he had accumulated privileges without understanding the true meaning of human impact. As the murmur grew louder, some people adjusted themselves in their seats, as if wanting to ensure they wouldn't miss any detail of the scene. Others whispered discreetly, commenting amongst themselves on the billionaire's exaggerated posture. It was like watching a building about to collapse without the owner himself noticing the cracks forming. With each abrupt interruption, each out-of-place laugh, each sarcastic comment, he dug himself a little deeper into a hole, and yet still believed he was in control. The hidden truth is that many downfalls begin exactly like this, when someone is at the peak of blind self-confidence. Arrogance prevented them from seeing the approaching change, and this made everything even more intense. The way they ignored the signs around them, the way they refused to perceive people's discomfort, all indicated that their worldview was about to be confronted in an undeniable way. It was like watching a runner rushing towards a door they don't know is locked, and the collision was only a matter of time. And even though no one said it openly, everyone felt that something big was about to happen. The atmosphere in the courtroom grew dense, as if charged with a silent electricity. The decisions he made at that moment, each phrase uttered with disdain, each gesture of superiority, only reinforced the feeling that his downfall had been announced long before he realized it. And unknowingly, he himself fueled this downfall with the conviction that he was above the law, above people, and above any consequence. But the game of life has a peculiar way of balancing everything. Arrogance may open doors at first, but sooner or later you find someone who doesn't bend, someone who sees through the masks. And that moment in court was living proof that no matter how high someone climbs, there's always a point where the truth finds a way to reveal itself. Write this down. I'm on this journey too. And it is precisely when the atmosphere seems about to break that something happens. Something so simple in appearance, yet so profound in impact, that it completely changes the course of that room. The woman, who until then had remained seated, observing everything with the serenity of someone who knows her own strength, calmly places the documents on the table. Her movements are slow, precise, almost choreographed, as if each gesture carried a silent revelation that everyone was about to witness. She stands up. It is a different kind of standing, full of presence, the kind that makes even the air reconsider its position. And suddenly, the entire courtroom seems to breathe at the same time. The billionaire, who was still laughing and talking as if he owned the place, notices this movement and, for a moment, feels something strange. A sensation he doesn't easily recognize, but that we all know when we are. faced with a truth greater than our vanity. The transformation begins there, in the silence. The woman walks to the center of the room, her firm steps echoing with an authority that needs no announcement. Everyone follows with their eyes, some with surprise, others with relief, as if they were finally seeing revealed what they had only intuited. The hidden truth begins to emerge as naturally as it is inevitable. When the court officer raises his voice to announce the judge responsible for the case, there is a second of suspension in the air, as if time stopped to listen. And then the revelation falls upon everyone like a silent yet devastating wave. It is her, the same woman whom the billionaire humiliated, ignored, underestimated, and treated as invisible. She is the judge. She is the one who will decide his future. The impact is immediate. The billionaire's face drains of color as if drained. He pales in an almost cinematic way, but nothing there is acting. It's pure, emotional. Collapse, the crumbling of an ego that never imagined being confronted in this way. The man, so accustomed to walking above the rules, suddenly finds himself small, vulnerable, exposed. He tries to compose himself, adjusts his tie, straightens his suit, takes a deep breath, but none of it works, because no outward posture can hide the inner trembling of someone who realizes he has lost control of his own narrative. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject because there is something extremely powerful in the way certain revelations happen. They are not just moments of shock, they are mirrors that reveal who we truly are. The journey of that billionaire, built upon decisions made with arrogance, finally met its consequences. And it wasn't arbitrary punishment, it was poetic justice, pure and invincible. When someone spends their life believing they can trample on others without paying the price, they inevitably reach the point where the world returns, with surgical precision, everything that was sown. As the judge takes her seat, the courtroom falls into a silence that is not uncomfortable, but reverent. It's as if everyone there feels they are witnessing something greater than a simple trial. This is a revelation about morality, about mentality, about the real impact our attitudes have behind the scenes of life. She didn't need to raise her voice to command respect. Her presence was enough. Her posture contained years of dedication, sleepless nights, sacrifices, barriers overcome, and all of this shone not as vanity but as dignity. The billionaire, on the other hand, seemed to shrink in his chair. His eyes searched for some way out, some vestige of control, but there was nothing. He stood before the woman he had tried to humiliate, but now in a position where he couldn't utter a word without direct consequences. And there lay the true twist. The one who had previously been treated as inferior now held the reins of the destiny of the man who had tried to trample her. There was no vengeance in the air, only an inevitable truth. Life always finds a way to reveal the true weight of our actions. The emotional impact of that scene was so strong that even those watching from a distance could feel it. There was shame, yes, but not only for the billionaire. It was a collective shame, a silent reminder of how often prejudice acts subtly, invisibly, in a normalized way, until confronted by someone who refuses to accept that imposed role. The judge didn't look at him with resentment, and that somehow made everything even more powerful. Her calmness conveyed the message that true authority doesn't need shouting or humiliation. It is sustained by truth itself. And while the billionaire crumbled before that reality, trying to regain the emotional balance that was slipping through his fingers, the entire room absorbed the magnitude of the transformation that was taking place there. It was more than a role reversal. It was the impact of a revelation that would change not only the course of that trial, but also the perception that each person there would carry into their own life. Dignity had triumphed over prejudice, and this kind of victory leaves deep marks because it reminds us of the power that exists in justice done with integrity. The billionaire swallowed hard, battling his own pride, realizing that his world, so carefully constructed, had never been as solid as he believed. And while he tried to comprehend what would come, next, the judge adjusted her papers with the same calm she had shown from the beginning. There was no hurry, no arrogance. There was only the silent certainty that this moment would mark a definitive turning point, a turning point that would show him and everyone else that no mask can withstand the truth when it finally finds space to reveal itself. Comment below. This makes sense to me. And in that instant when the judge adjusts the papers before her, something almost imperceptible, yet profoundly symbolic happens. The entire room seems to align itself to her rhythm. It's not a sudden change, not a sudden shock. It's a serenity that imposes itself as a silent reminder that true authority doesn't need to be displayed. The billionaire, still stunned, tries to catch his breath, but each of his movements seems disconnected, hesitant, as if his body were finally realizing the weight of his own choices. The judge, on the other hand, maintains her posture intact, each gesture imbued with a quiet firmness that needs no explanation. And it is precisely there that the greatest difference between them is revealed. While he relied on appearances, she relied on essence. The first few minutes of conducting the trial make it clear that she has no intention of humiliating him. There is no hint of revenge, no irony, no petty satisfactions that so many people might have expected. Her power comes from elsewhere, from a clear conscience, from competence, from ethics that remain firm even when it would be so easy to stray from the path. This posture, so rare and so strong, makes every word she speaks have an even greater impact. She speaks with precision, with a calmness that dismantles any attempt at intimidation, as if she were used to dealing with storms and, therefore, knew exactly how to keep the ship on the right course. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there is something transformative in observing how someone uses authority not to dominate, but to balance. The judge's mindset was built on foundations that the billionaire never understood: discipline, self-control, courage, and a clear vision of purpose. While he believed that power was synonymous with volume, with shouting, imposing, crushing, she showed that true power is silent, thoughtful, firm without needing to be aggressive. And this contrast revealed much more than just a difference in posture. It showed a hidden truth about how each of them had built their journey. The emotional impact of this in the courtroom was palpable. People paid attention not only to the content of what she said, but to how she said it. There was a moral elegance there, an integrity that cannot be bought, inherited, or faked. Every decision she made during the case analysis made it clear that justice is not a spectacle, not a tool of ego. It is responsibility. And she carried this responsibility with a serenity that impressed even those who did not deeply understand the legal terms being presented. The billionaire, in turn, seemed to shrink a little more with each passing minute. Not because she diminished him, but because he himself was being confronted with the reality of who he had always been. Someone who underestimated himself, someone who believed that position and money were enough to shape the world around him. Now, facing her, he was discovering the impact of his own decisions. It was as if the weight of years of arrogance was finally meeting a mirror, and this mirror neither distorted nor attacked him. It simply showed the truth so clearly it couldn't be denied. The judge continued conducting the trial with almost cinematic mastery, but without dramatic exaggeration. It was the naturalness of someone who is in control of their role. This naturalness, in fact, was what most disconcerted the billionaire. He expected anything: anger, confrontation, gratuitous harshness, but what he found was something much more difficult to confront: balance. And this balance exposed every weakness in him, every attempt to hide his fear behind arrogance. It was as if her very existence contradicted everything he had believed throughout his life about hierarchy, value, and authority. The lesson wasn't in the words, but in the demeanor, and everyone there perceived it. The audience, previously uncomfortable, now watched with a mixture of admiration and reflection. It was impossible not to think about the times we had underestimated someone, or the times we had been underestimated. The story unfolding before them transcended the legal case. It was about dignity, about inner strength, about the silent impact of those who refused to be molded by difficulties. With each firm look from the judge, with each clearly presented technical explanation, the court seemed to breathe a kind of renewed respect. She didn't humiliate the billionaire because she didn't need to in order to prove anything. The truth itself already put him in his place. It was the victory of integrity over pride, of ethics over abuse, of maturity over arrogance. And in a way, this victory extended to everyone there, because it showed that there is still room in the world for justice that does not become corrupted, even when no one believes it will prevail. As the trial progresses and the pieces fall into place, the billionaire finally lowers his gaze, not in submission, but in understanding. He realizes that her authority didn't come from her position, but from the journey that enabled her to wield it with greatness. He also realizes that nothing in the world prepared him for this kind of confrontation, not an external one, but an internal one. And that, in itself, was a revelation. And as the court delves into this silent transformation, an inevitable reflection arises, almost like a whisper shared among all present. Never underestimate someone for what you think they are. There are stories, struggles, and achievements that don't appear at first glance, but that completely define who the person has become. And often it is precisely the person you try to diminish who carries the deepest authority, the kind that doesn't need to be proclaimed, only lived. Write this down. I'm on this journey too, and if you've made it this far, you can sense that this story touched you in some way, perhaps through poetic justice, perhaps through the silent strength of the judge, perhaps through something that awakened within you. And that's precisely why I want to invite you to continue walking this path with me. If this type of narrative resonates with you, if it inspires you, provokes you, or makes you see the world in a different way, subscribe to the channel. That way, you'll receive more content that carries the same depth, the same intention of bringing reflections that stay with us even after the video ends. And since you've made it this far, leave a comment saying, "I'm with you until the end." It's the most beautiful way for me to know that you've been with me on this entire journey, that you've been there for every twist and turn, every revelation, every piece of this story. If the video gave you any new insights, feelings, or thoughts worth taking further, please leave a like. Not as an automatic gesture, but as a way to strengthen the connection we've built along the way. And before you leave, there's a video over here that continues along the same lines of reflection and transformation. Click and stay with me there. The conversation is just beginning.